Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the sixth episode of 360 TF Business Unplugged series. This initiative aims to unite industry leaders from various geographies and sectors to discuss significant topics of concern and importance. Join us for an enlightening discussion on global trends in SME finance, innovations for a changing world. We are proud to host two distinguished experts, Mr. Kamal Salim, Global Head of SME Finance Forum, managed by the IFC, and Mr. Vikram Lodha, co-founder and CEO of 360 TF. Their combined expertise promises an enlightening conversation you won't want to miss. Vikram is a seasoned banking professional with over 20 years of experience at Citibank and Kotak Mahindra Bank in India. His expertise spans transaction banking, trade products, and supply chain finance, reflecting a deep understanding of industry dynamics. Passionate about technology, he is known for driving digital innovation in banking and finance. He is a respected speaker at global trade conferences and actively contributes to industry committees such as FICCI FinTech and Sustainable Finance Working Group at SME Finance Forum. Without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Mr. Kamar Salim, Global Head of SME Finance Forum. Kamar is the SME Finance Head at the world's leading center for knowledge exchange and public-private dialogue in SME finance. With over 30 years of experience, he has worked across 60 plus countries, managing large business lines and multicultural teams. Kamal has been with IFC since 2012. Prior to his current role at IFC, Kamal led Financial Institution Group Advisory Services for Asia and Pacific region, focusing on MSME and supply chain finance. His extensive background includes leadership positions at HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, and Deutsche Bank. Kamal holds an MBA and numerous certifications in areas such as strategy, climate finance, and MSME banking. In addition to his professional achievements, Kamal Salim is also an accomplished musician, using his music to connect with others and convey powerful messages of hope, unity, and healing. With these introductions complete, I would now like to invite our co-founder and chairman, CA Pankaj Mundra. Pankaj has been at the forefront of the trade finance world with over 2 decades of experience in the industry and has been leading 360 TF at various fronts like BAF, ITFA, and ICC committees. Over to you, Pankaj, for a few words before we begin with this fireside chat.
Hello.
Yes, Pankaj.
Thanks Akshita for the great introduction and a great start. We welcome our guest of the day, Mr. Kamal Salim. Fantastic to have someone like him who's been leading the SME Finance Forum on the behalf of IFC. I think at 360 TF, the SME is the key focus as we help them get liquidity from their receivables or help them for their payables. SME across India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, East Africa have been our focus area, and we've been advising and guiding them to get liquidity, grow to the new market, expand into new markets. Post-COVID, with the growth which every country have seen, and SME is playing a very, very important role. And for that important role, where whether it's Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, all the countries in emerging markets is all-time high exports, and SME is playing a very, very important role. Who could be better than Mr. Kamal Salim today to guide us and see that how we can together advise and help the SME grow to the new markets and, of course, get the right financial and liquidity structure. So I'm glad that we have Kamal Salim today. We welcome you, and we once again welcome all our guests to this series of Business Unplugged. Thank you, Akshata.
Thanks, Pankaj. I'm sure everyone is waiting now to hear from Kamar and Vikram. Over to you, Vikram.
Yeah, thanks, Akshita, and thanks, Pankaj, for that introduction. It is indeed a pleasure to have Mr. Kamar Salim with us today, and very kind of him to accept our, request and be a part of the Business Unplugged series. A bit about the Business Unplugged series, Kamar. This is a forum that we've been working on for last 6 months. We've been going cross businesses, cross geographies, and inviting people from various walks of life to share their life experiences, and all directed towards a larger objective of how do we digitize the larger financial ecosystem that we're talking about. It's all focused towards the DFS side of things, digital financial services. When we were talking about SMEs and the data ecosystem, we said who better than you to really talk about it and give us an overview of a lot of things that are happening globally. I didn't know this fact that you have, overseen 60 different geographies. This is exemplary from an coverage perspective. We are all keen to hear it from you. A few words from your side before we kickstart our discussion.
No, thank you, Vikram and Pankaj, for such a warm welcome. And I think SME is almost like, I believe, my second life in many ways, because I've been breathing and living SME finance first in my banking career, and then advising institutions. I've advised more than 300 institutions across these 60 markets. So I think it's not just, I've learned a lot from the institutions, and SME banking is the kind of banking where you celebrate and also weep at times, and you have to uh, kind of cover your scars and move on. But at the same time, it gives such high kind of satisfaction to you in actually making a difference, because what you're touching is really people's lives at the core. And I think apart from the job and everything, I think what I really feel and what I really value is an ability to make an impact to people's lives. And I think that's resonates with the objective of IFC in the World Bank of really making a difference. So I am really looking forward to the dialogue. I know, Vikram, you've been in this area as well, so love to learn from you as well, because everybody that I feel we meet teaches us something. So I look forward to the dialogue, and I'm really happy to be here amongst all of you today.
Thank you, Kamar. Um, you know, a small aspect on the SME side, and each time I read a report published on SME, I see that the so-called, or the most vibrant number is the trade finance gap that's ever increasing. The small and medium enterprises are often flattered, right, as being called the backbone of the world economies. But we all know the real life situation. We are at now. I was reading a recent report of IFC. It says $5.7 trillion of trade finance gap. So this is something that's a reality. We talk about various numbers. SMEs today account for 50% of global GDP, and some of the geographies they account for upwards of 80-90% of businesses. And still, the trade finance gap that we are all talking about is something that is widening. What is your quick take on that side? What are the global trends that are currently shaping the trade finance for SMEs?
So let me start with the number that you've mentioned, the 5.7 trillion, and the unfortunate reality is that the number has been increasing. And despite all the global efforts, but I like to highlight that it's not that the number is only increasing and nobody's financing. The supply side, we see the 5.7, but the supply of SME finance has increased in the last 5 to 8 years from 3.7 trillion to 4.6 trillion. So the supply has increased. The issue is that the demand is outpacing the supply. And I think that's where we are always playing a catch-up game because the demand is growing twice the rate of the supply. And I think that's where the problem is. And I also the demand for SME finance, if you really look at the 5.7 gap, what is being financed, combine it together, the overall size of this is over $10 trillion, when you look at the market as such. And when you look at the global GDP, it's more than 10% of the global GDP. So it's a large market, and I feel it's one of the single biggest opportunities for the financial sector to leverage. And I'll also like to talk about informal, because the nearly 10 trillion is the market for the formal finance, and another 2.1 trillion is for the informal finance. And then I think nearly 1.9 trillion is locked in SME finance not being given to where it's needed for women entrepreneurs. So that's another. So there are different ways to look at the SME finance gap, but the issue is that, and that's where we have been trying to play a role, is how do we catalyze and help scale SME finance at speed, so that it can catch up to the global. So I just wanted to give a quick context of what the market looks like in terms of the overall um, finance gap. But going to the leading trends, what I'm seeing right now are six leading trends that are shaping the industry. One is the first one, digital and embedded finance. There are projections that in the next 5 years, the embedded finance, which is less than 3% of the banking wallet, will grow to about 20 to 25%. So that's really a fast growing phenomenon. Second is the alternate data and the use of AI. I think the more, and AI is not just for customer experience, but for underwriting, for evaluating your business performance in many ways. And alternate data is another area that we are seeing increasingly. In some ways, fintechs have taught us how to do that, and the institutions have kind of picked it up, the larger institutions. The third is sustainable SME finance, to greening SMEs, and overall, if you combine all the SMEs together, they contribute more than 50% of the GHG emission collectively. So there is no net zero without SMEs. The fourth key aspect is an increasing focus on women and youth, and how institutions are now gearing up to go into the underserved segments as a business opportunity. Fifth, very dear to you, Vikram, is supply chain finance. I really see supply chain is one of the single biggest opportunities, and I'll not talk more about it. I think I'm sure we'll go deeper into this. Non-financial services, so combining financial with skill building solutions, and lastly, the new enabling environment. I think that's the sixth trend I'm seeing, with open finance, with the eKYCs, with new regimes coming, e-invoicing, many new enabling environment coming, which is going to help. So I think collectively these trends can help the SME finance, but the question is how effectively these are leveraged. So let me pause here, Vikram. You may have reflections on this.
So this is wonderful, and you kind of summed up so beautifully. To start with, I would say, happy to hear the positive news that the supply side has also increased significantly. A trillion odd addition is not small by any stretch, and now that's a positive trend. But yes, the demand outpaces the supply, and the the role of fintech, Kamar, as we see it today, and I see that across multiple geographies, especially the developing markets. I would say part of Asia, and multiple geographies in Africa. We have multiple types of companies coming up with very different solutions that one can think of, and on various fronts. The moment you talk about there's no zero emission without participation of SMEs, I see so many companies coming up with unique solutions in the Africa market, and which are really interesting and can really add a lot of value to the large corporates as well. Now, coming back to the finance side of things, you touched upon supply chain. That's actually, very dear, and I see a lot of progress on that side. And each time we, look at the entire framework, how do we reduce this gap? One of the things that comes to my mind and very, very strongly is how do we kind of participate more and more in global supply chain financing and digitize the entire financial services and space as far as the supply chain piece is concerned. And we've seen all those advancements with respect to the digital negotiable instruments and e-invoicing. You touched upon that. uh, how do you see this piece kind of faring, the entire factoring bit or the supply chain bit? Is it really making a impact out there, or something more needs to be really worked upon from a strategy perspective itself?
So, Vikram, I think when I had initially joined IFC, we were not doing a lot of advisory on supply chain finance, and that's something when I came in, I had started because I used to manage supply chain businesses in international banks I was associated with, and that's really key part of the transaction banking outfits. Vikram, you've been in transaction banking. So supply chain finance, the way I see it is of the 5.7 trillion, nearly 20% of it is locked in the value chains. So that's per our estimates, and that gives you easily a number of over $1 trillion, just in that space. So it's a big opportunity. But I always see that it's like a 5-quarter model, in when it comes to supply chain finance. You have the large corporation, you have the bank, you have the fintech, you have the regulator, and you have the SME. And I think these 5 need to kind of tango together. Now the issue is in my
Kamar, interesting to see the regulator aspect being brought in.
no, it's
Please.
important because
Yeah.
I'll tell you, we were working in one of the countries in South Asia, and we were working with the central bank, and we actually created a committee at the central bank for supply chain finance because the understanding of the regulator was very weak on what those instruments are. So the LGD, or the for sale value, being attributed to receivables and inventory, was same as overdraft, and it is not a risk. It's not really the same risk class, so, and it was eating up the capital, and hence, institutions were not keen to go into this, so there was a lot of there was no, in some countries I was working in East Asia, Indonesia, and some other countries where cloud hosting of data is not allowed, on-premise data is needed. So institutions cannot come in, international players, and play a role, and it has to be locally born, the institution. So regulation plays a very, very important role, and that's where. So we are working with for example, with Morocco, and they decided to set up a country strategy on supply chain finance. The central bank actually took a lead and said we need to have a country strategy on supply chain finance, and that shows they, alongside the Ministry of Finance and Commerce, took the driving seat on driving that strategy. So I do feel a regulator role is sometimes undermined. It's not just a ping pong between the large corporation and the financial institutions with the fintech in the middle. I think it's more than that, So I think in these 5 corners that I've mentioned, I think there are always challenges. I've seen sometimes regulation. There's no even secure transaction regimes in countries where you can actually register collateral and to recognize receivable or inventory as a collateral. And in many countries, we actually saw, because I've, at least, on supply chain finance only, I've advised more than 50 institutions. And what I've seen is that most of them really don't see the transaction banking. It's more see the finance side of the business, the tier 1 side of the business, where a Nestle supplier, or the large international supply chains. That's where cities and HSBCs and others. That's where the whole concept was born. But the real value and the SMEs don't lie in. I mean, some of the SMEs that are some of the institutions that are supplying to these companies are themselves very large corporations. So I think you really need to go into what we call deep tier. And unless you go into the deep tier, you cannot really reach the SMEs. And when you go into the deep tier, there are many more opportunities out there. So I think, so regulatory is one aspect. Banking, in many ways, has not really gone into beyond the obsession for tier one. Typically, I call it the obsession for tier one because it's just easy to do, and they've not gone beyond one or two products. You mentioned reverse factoring and supply chain factoring, and factoring and reverse factoring are very good solutions, but there are many other kids on the block. I mean, you can look at PO financing, you can look at distributor financing. So I'll give you an example, Vikram. I mean, I was in Brazil, and we were working with an institution there, and very interestingly, they led with distributor finance. They didn't really lead with, reverse factoring, which was unusual because typically institutions start with a more risk mitigated product. And then they transitioned into retailer financing. So in the distributor network, there were about close to 30,000 retailers. And they used data that they gathered through the distribution network and modeled that for financing. And then they went to consumer financing. So issuing cards for communities to buy from those retailers, and there was financing loaded up to it. And then they transitioned into reverse factoring and then eventually the PO financing. So I've rarely seen institutions offer this range of products, but it was an evolution. So I think that's the other thing financial institutions are not doing well in terms of transitioning beyond conventional products. Some have not even gone beyond invoice financing. So I think but it's catching up. I think the trend is catching up. Large corporations, on the other hand, sorry, I want to finish the five corner models, and then I'm sure you may have reflections. The large corporations, sometimes they are not really looking at supply chain. They don't understand. We had to sometimes run sessions for the large corporations to understand what they need to do differently. They're very careful about the data sharing. You go to a large corporation and they'll say, no, this is my data, I cannot share it. But we were working with a client in Middle East, and when we saw the credit history that the large corporation had, this is in my banking days, we realized that you can build a whole credit model on the back of that data, which is sitting in the registers of these large corporations. So, I mean, you need to go into the large corporations and build their capacity also. And then, of course, fintechs have, practically 1 to 2 fintechs are born every week these days in supply chain finance. So this is a trend fast catching up. So they have really been the game changers in many ways. And lastly, the SMEs, for them to understand what they can do, how they can leverage the invoice, which kind of sits in the dad's drawer at some times. Because a lot of generational problems are also there in SMEs because this is a graduation issue. So I think from that standpoint, building capacity of the SMEs, building capacity of the regulator, building capacity of the financial institutions, of the large corporations, and really leveraging the fintech and supply chain platform in the middle is, I think I say, the five corner model that needs to be optimized.
So this is a fantastic example, Kamar. I've come across the four corner model for a factoring perspective, but the fifth corner was interesting one. And when I reflect back, I have seen this now very closely in India as a market, wherein the regulator took the lead to support the SME financing, and it's really kind of enabled the entire ecosystem from a financing perspective. It has enabled the lenders, most importantly, given them the legal enforceability on the entire transaction, got the Factoring Act first. So it was a very, I would say, thought through framework. Got the Factoring Act first, then got the players who would run these platforms, and then the lenders kind of warmed up to them, and then the government drove it. The push was immense. To the extent today, I would say there are three, four players on this side, and they collectively do, and this is all domestic factoring for wherein it's large corporate on one side and the SMEs on the other side. They can only do for SMEs, and they all do upwards of or close to $1 billion kind of flows every month from a potential financing perspective. While the financing rates are lesser than that, but then yes, this is the kind of potential that's coming out there for the financing perspective. And from a participation of the regulator, that is Reserve Bank of India, they have been at the forefront of it, and they've been really driving this entire piece. Yes, I'm completely with you. With the regulator by your side, understanding the framework and driving it collectively, the transformation happens at a more directed manner and at a good pace. While you touched upon the deep tier piece, that's again something that I've been trying to solve that in my mind for so many years now. How do you really uh, get visibility of multiple tiers, and how do you really control the financing at multiple levels? And I would say that there are two potential frameworks that I came across over the years. One was the entire tokenization bit. You can distribute the tokens at multiple levels. More recent framework that we are working on now on the supply chain side, and again in the cross-border arena, is through a commercial card rail, and a commercial card which will be distributed again through multiple channels. And that's something that I'm finding it, uh, I would say, at there is one underlying theme that we've been using from day one, Kamar, when we started off as 360TF. The usage of technology has to be very, very simple, because on one side you have a SME from a developing market, and you do have constraint, and you highlighted that as a challenge on the SME side as well. So we have been very conscious of that fact. With the guardrails coming in, the acceptability or usability of those has been there for a while, at least on the consumer side. The architecture remains the same. It's just that the use case is getting changed. So that's something that's new, and we see that as a framework. See, in midst of all this, I see you playing a public-private kind of a coercive role now under SME Finance Forum. Can you highlight or can you share what all are the key objectives of SME Finance Forum, and what is it that you are really focusing on right now as SMEFF?
No, thanks, Vikram. And before I go to the forum, I just want to have a quick reflection on what you mentioned on technology, because whether it's tokenization, whether it's blockchain, whether it's I mean, there are so many different variants to new technologies. But one of the things I've learned, I'll give you example. I was in Dominican Republic, once in Colombia, Kenya, and a few other countries, once in Jordan, and in Vietnam. So I'm just telling you because this kind of covers all the regions. And I was talking to some of the key banks in these markets. And the first discussion when we went into the discussion was, okay, we have identified a supply chain platform and we're launching the supply chain platform. So my question always was that platform really comes more towards the end when you know what you want to do. Because if you don't know the kind of products, the kind of segments, the kind of corporates that you want to deal with, you can have a great platform. So I want to kind of highlight, maybe some participants are there who are thinking about it, and usually the first point of recall is, okay, let's go and find a supply chain platform. I think supply chain platforms are great, sources, but I think you need to think through your own strategy first, and then onboard the right partner. And in many ways, some of the key partners, and that's what we've done. Vikram, we've taken some of the platforms to our clients, introduce them and actually make them understand what it can do, and there are various types of it. So I just want to kind of clarify that because I've seen this trend in many institutions, and these are tier one large institutions I'm talking about. These are not really mom and pop kind of banks. But coming to SME Finance Forum, so
So, Kamal, I'll just come in and add on to this. This is, in my previous role as a banker, when these transitions were happening, and very early stage of the transitions, I can tell you, we realized, and I was at the forefront. I wanted to adopt the technology version of supply chain and go really deep into it in terms of what all things can be done. And we actually scouted on a technology platform of our own. But very early, I would say I realized that this is not something you can do. It's not one size fits all. So, the next approach that I took was there was a red carpet welcome for every participant in the market. The way it kind of worked out was technology was brought in by the fintech or by the supply chain partner. Credit decision was at the bank's end, and that was the joining end. You bring in the solution, and I bring in the credit, and we work together if both meets together. But that gave us the leverage of working with multiple players in the market and not become technology agnostic. We were actually technology agnostic, not sticking to one. Yeah, sorry,
yeah,
you continue.
no, on that, Vikram, I think I'm glad you touched upon it because there's always this question about multi-bank platform or a single bank platform, and that invariably comes for discussion. And one interesting model I saw was in Mexico, where there's an institution there called NAFIN, and they actually run supply chain finance instrument auctions. So basically, what it happens is that invoices are uploaded, and there are 10, 15 banks signed up to that program, and they bid for it. And the best, in a way, that created a competition because even in a multi-bank environment, you typically have one node to go to. But in this kind of a setup where auctions were happening, I think it became like a marketplace, which is relatively unique. It's catching up. I've started seeing in some other countries, but I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. So I agree. I think we need to not just look at technology as an enabler, but also graduate it over time. What it can do for you, for the players. Now, coming to the forum itself, Vikram, I don't know if many participants know about it, but SME Finance Forum was born out of a G20 initiative because it was born in 2012. And at that time, the idea was that there needs to be some institution that brings policymakers, financial institutions, all the relevant SME industry associations, all the knowledge hubs around one table and try and see what needs to be done to scale SME finance. So we've been graduating as a forum. We started, I'd say 1.0, where we really started off getting engagement from people. That was between 2012 and 16 and 2023. It was more about the 2.0, where we grew our network. And now we're in the 3.0 version. I took over the role about 9 months ago, and I think we are now transitioning towards impact and solution building, innovation, and more, solving problems for the industry. But right now, our network has more than 300 members and partners with the coverage of 190 countries. Our network partners are helping 33 million SMEs in different geographies in their SME finance. So we really have a pulse on the finger in many of the markets. And typically our core members, the driving force are banks, fintechs. I think this is the largest proportion, followed by DFIs. And then, of course, we have policymakers, industry partners, knowledge hubs, innovation bodies. We have many. I mean, of the 300, nearly 80 are actually our partners, United Nations, name it. I think all the key players who play, anybody that breathes or sniffs SME banking is kind of connected to us in some way. But I think what we really feel when I took over the role, I felt, if that's really our objective to scale SME finance. So yes, it is scaling, but it's not scaling at the speed at which it needs. Uh, and why? Because we need to solve industry solutions. So we've launched innovation hubs and new initiatives that we've been working on, so that we pick up industry problems and we try and solve it using our knowledge network partners, and we catalyze solutions. We don't just catalyze knowledge, we catalyze solutions. I think that's our prime goal going forward. So SME Finance Forum is now, working across, all these players and trying to not just build knowledge but also build solutions. And I think we are welcoming institutions who want to learn, as well as we are welcoming institutions who want to teach, because we have some of the biggest institutions like DBS, large institutions, Santanders, BNP Paribas of the world. We have some of the larger banks, FNB in South Africa, Standard Bank in Brazil, many institutions. So we have some of the largest institutions as part of our network as well, in addition to mid-tier banks, small banks. And then we have different types of fintechs. We have two categories. We have fintech lenders and fintech enablers. And we have two types of DFIs. We have three types actually. We have multilaterals, we have local DFIs, and we have credit guarantee corporations. And just to give you an example of how we can scale solutions. So there was a solution built by UNDP and the Monetary Authority of Singapore that we were working on. It's called Universal Trusted Credentials, where the idea was, how do you use alternate data to build a trust score so SMEs can trade internationally? It was going on, and one pilot was started in Ghana, and I think now we're trying to build it because we have 19 DFIs in our network. We can easily take it to multiple markets. So we are trying to find solutions wherever we see, and we try and replicate it across other countries. So that's our forum, and the prime objective is, we need to make impact. We need to grow SME finance and actually create livelihoods.
So this is wonderful, Kamar. This is a role that goes beyond, and I've have, I've had the opportunity to be a part of one of the community practices, and I've seen that the approach is to take it to execution and not just leave it as strategy. And that was the, I would say, core driver for me to be a participant and really contribute. But I see that there are positive strides, and the membership has grown significantly. And 190 countries is really is covering the entire geography, the entire globe that way. This you want to also touch upon the upcoming annual event a bit, and what is in it for the participants? What should one look for?
I think you should look for magic. Uh, but basically, what we're trying to bring, our next event is in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It's from 16 to 18 of September. And the title of the conference is AI Powered Digital and Sustainable SME Finance. So really solutions at the nexus of AI, at the nexus of digitization, and at the nexus of sustainability is really what we're focusing on. But these are not the only topics we'll cover. The 3 days is a long period. So we have practically every aspect related to SME finance covered. So you'll be pleased to know, Vikram, you've been attending the forums in the past, but we have a very highly structured conference this time, where day one is a learning day, where we have study tours to some of the best institutions in Brazil, some of the most sophisticated I've seen in my career. We have institutions like Itaú, Bradesco, Sicredi, very large institutions. And then we have fintechs, we have development banks, we have MasterCard, we have Visa, we have, nearly 9 physical and 2 in on-premise, at the conference venue. So 11 study tours. of different nature. And again, we have very carefully curated it to bring the new knowledge out. We have innovation hubs, 5 innovation hubs discussions on supply chain finance, on agri-finance, on digital finance, women entrepreneurship, and sustainable SME finance. And the way we've designed it, we have a 90-minute discussion on Innovation Hub and a 90 minutes training. So a 3-hour condensed where and it's very case studies based. It's not going to be one person advocating and teaching or 2 people. We have at least, across the 10 sessions we have on Innovation Hub and training, we will have close to about 30 examples shared in those sessions, use cases. And we've made it very much case. If we say talk about ag tech, there'll be 3 ag tech solutions being presenting how they are actually doing it. If you're saying climate smart agri, we will have solutions, showcasing how it can be done. Very practical oriented. So day 1 is learning. Day 2 is more about policy and really bringing AI and sustainability, the thematic areas, to the forefront. So we'll have in some of the biggest institutions from IFC, we have a large contingent as well present at the forum. So we go into policy and then we transition into the thematic priorities of the conference. And day 3 really becomes the voice of the SME, because typically we have conferences, but where is the voice of the SME? Are we really hearing what they want? So we'll have fintechs coming to pitch. We are starting the day with a story of one of the biggest Brazilian entrepreneurs who brought a mom and pop shop into one of the biggest retail giants of Brazil. She will tell her story of how she built that. And then throughout the day, we touch upon managing SMEs through the life cycle and all that. So it's really taking the whole event to the core. And lastly, I want to mention that it's not going to stop there. We will have action planning roundtables. We'll have at least 5 to 6 roundtables where we'll create action plans on where do we take, because the way I see our conferences are not a blip that it happens and then another blip happens in a year, and I think they should be part of a continuum. So I would like to measure what we agreed and how many of those things we have solved to our next conference. And I think that's the way. And there'll be knowledge content coming out of it. There'll be knowledge pieces, there'll be content, they'll release a report on what we've learned. So far, just to close off, Vikram, we have nearly 150 speakers at the event. We've never had this kind of a show. Last year, we had about 80 speakers, and we will have nearly already 80 plus countries represented there. So it's, I think, I really, our team has been working very hard, and also we have collaborated with Elavandi, which is the organizer of Singapore FinTech Festival, who are really knowledgeable and experienced in managing large events. So we have some strategic partners, like that, who are helping us reshape our forum. So I'll encourage participants. They can find details on our website. But and I'm glad, Vikram, you'll be joining and be part of that journey. But it's gonna shape up well.
No, absolutely. Looking forward to it, and thanks for sharing the breakup of the 3 days and the themes that you are running on. I'm sure we'll have participation. We'll have a wonderful event on that. Moving on, cover. While we spoke about what's happening on the day and where are we today, but how do you see the future outlook shaping up? And if you were to pick up one theme, partnership between the traditional institutions and the fintech play shaping up, how it is supporting the SMEs. One thematic thing, if you were to point out, and we say that that's the near-term thing that you see happening out there, which is making impact, or which can make a larger impact on the SME financing a bit. I leave that to you. What comes to your mind?
So, Vikram, maybe I'll talk about, if I take the liberty, of saying three
Okay,
key
sure. Please.
aspects that are going to change. Of course, fintech partnerships is a very important one, and fintech partnership is not just at the financing. I mean, there are 10 different areas where fintechs can come in to support SMEs, because one of the things I've been advocating it that SMEs also need to become digital to the core. I think it's not just about financing being digitized or invoicing being digitized. I think it's unless they digitize, you cannot plug into their data and all that. So I see there are 10 different tools that they can use, SMEs. And I'll start there because that's where the problem is. So one is the payments. I think a lot of time the payment solutions are very conventional. So new age payment solutions. E-commerce, increasingly we're seeing e-commerce become increasingly important, online stores and all that. SME doesn't have to open a shop. I mean, you can open up a shop on a retail e-commerce at $10. Why do you want to spend $100,000 renting a shop and everything? So e-commerce is fast shaping up. Of course, supply chain platforms is a third area that fintechs, partnerships need to be built between SMEs, large corporations, and the banks. AgTech is becoming much more prevalent, using satellite technologies, AI data on how AgTechs are changing the market. Digital marketing, I think it's no longer about TV, radio, and others. I think digital marketing is really the name of the game now. Accounting softwares, many SMEs don't even know have an inventory management systems or receivable management system. So if they have an inventory management system, accounting system, it's very easy uh, uh, to build interfaces to log into that system and actually get data and interfaces out. Of course, e-commerce platform, I've already talked about collateral registries, how that's very important for SMEs to be able to register their invoices and working capital. And I'm talking more about working capital because that's where the problem is, Vikram. A lot of you'll be surprised to know that 80% of the demand of the finance from SMEs is working capital finance, but 80% of the supply of the 4 odd trillion that I mentioned, uh, 80% of the supply is medium to long-term finance, because you can do a 1-year loan or a 3-year loan or a 4-year loan with an annuity payment. So that's easier to manage. So there's clear disconnect there, and unless collateral registries are managed, I don't think they can get there. So I think, and I'll end by saying that the digital public infrastructure also is very important as we go forward. And India is a great example of how DPI has changed the market, because I do feel that you start off with digital inclusion, you transition into financial inclusion, and then you transition into economic inclusion. I think it goes in that order. And just kind of, so that's one big theme on the fintech partnerships, and fintech solutions that are sitting out there. But I think the other thing that needs to happen is that SMEs need to integrate themselves into ecosystems, and so do fintechs, so do financial institutions. Uh, so that ecosystem approach is needed. It's not just about having one corporation and one SME and one large corporation, or a set of a neighborhood. The ecosystems that need to be built. So I think they need to plug into those ecosystems. And then finally, so sustainability is something that is coming in fast, and especially it will be very, very relevant for value chain and supply chain finance. Unless SMEs embrace that, I think they have a risk of losing business, because increasingly the regulator space is becoming more aware, setting standards, setting benchmarks, setting pathways to greening. So I think if they don't embrace sustainability, they run the risk, SMEs. So that's another area, and we are seeing technology. There's one of the institutions we are working with, our member, who what they do is GHG emission is very hard to measure for SMEs, because they don't have data. But what they've built, there are two models I've seen, one in Singapore and one in UK. Singapore is basically Greenprint, and UK is Project Perseus. And what they're doing is they're using AI to measure GHG emissions. So what they're doing is picking up 5 data points and predicting the other 20 data points based on those data points. So using AI to measure, because you'll never have enough data to, if you wait for that, I think it will not happen in at least 2 of our generation's lifetimes. So I think that's the trend that we are seeing. So I think it's important that sustainability is actually embraced by SMEs and the value chain players uh, as a business opportunity, not as kind of something that you have to adhere to. Uh, and I've maintained that sustainability in SMEs is possibly one of the key opportunities out there, and you can take advantage of it. So it has to be seen as a business opportunity rather than a standard kind of meeting yardstick. So I think these are the three, just to finalize: partnerships across 10 different tools, really taking an ecosystem approach, and finally sustainability in SMEs, is something that needs to be seen as a business opportunity.
You summed it up beautifully, Kamar, and I really like the way you have patiently pointed out each area that the SME world is looking at, and what is it that we can do to make it better, to actually have an impact out there on the sustainability side, or within the financing also. It's the working capital that's needed more than the midterm and the long term financing, and these elements are not known apparently, Kamar. I can tell you, when we look at it's your work with SME Finance Forum, and the large extent of institutional coverage that you have, that gives you this kind of insight. So I really appreciate your insights and learning this from you. This has been a wonderful session, and
Uh,
once again, thank you for
Before
being here.
before Vikram, you kind of close out. You touched upon fintech partnership, and I wanted to make a quick reflection there.
Sure.
Because what happens is that I'll give you two examples. One, I cannot name them because there are confidentiality reasons, but there's one large bank in Asia. I talked to them for their SME and supply chain business. They have 250 fintech partners. So then there's another bank in US that we were talking to. And what they did was they invited a lot of fintechs, they understood how, and they built the entire thing in-house. So both very large institutions, highly successful institutions. But my question to the US institution was why? You don't have to build everything in-house when there are fintech solutions out there. Why don't you leverage it? Because you spent 18 months building it, whereas you could have plug and play a few, and you could have built a few others. So I think there needs to be mindset change on fintech partnerships. And when you speak to fintechs, because we have both fintechs and banks in our network. And when I was in Asia, I launched something together with MasterCard and Monetaries of Singapore called Apex, which is basically brings them together. And if fintechs find it very hard to gain access, and attention of these large corporations, because they are very complex to navigate. So I think that's a very important play, and I think that's where we also want to play a role, bring fintechs and banks and connect them, and not just connect them, because we have a third aspect that we can bring in investors, IFC, many others. So if we can bring an investor, bring them together, and put the money where the mouth is, I think it kind of scales the solution. So I do want to re-emphasize the importance of fintech partnerships before we
This
close.
is, the last few words are the best words, I can tell you. And this goes out to a large LinkedIn community also who's watching us live, people who are thinking of any solutions. You heard Kamar speaking about it, and I'm sure, knowing him now, he's one gentleman who can be reached out for if you have the right kind of solution. So people out there, Kamar, as we come to the close of this session, I discovered something about you when we were researching about you, and when we wanted to have you on board. Then there's a musician in you as well, and a very successful one. session cannot be complete without hearing something from you on that side as well. So we are all ears on that front as well. The floor is yours.
No, that's very interesting. And I was laughing with my kids, that I've been working for the last 30 years and I did music really in the last 2, 3 years. And my following on the music is multi-folds to my following on the LinkedIn. And so I don't know whether I got my priorities wrong in life, but
No, I can tell you, this is when I heard this song, Kamal, this is beautiful. No, no, I would. You can add a follower. You have a follower in me as well. As far as the music is concerned, it's
yeah. But let me tell you about it.
I won't say that, having known you on both the sides, I won't say that you wrong, got the priorities wrong, but yes, this is something that you missed out for 20 years, for sure.
Yeah. So Vikram, what happened was that I used to play music. I mean, I left it. So it's practically a music that was reborn during COVID, but because I got some time to rethink and I had my compositions stored away. In those days, we used to have those tapes and CDs and all that. Our kids don't know about these things these days. But so I kind of discovered those and I started working on it. And basically, I revived my passion. That's how I see it. And the music has had different roles in my life. And I feel anybody who's out there with any passion, I will suggest pursue your passion because it plays a different role in your life. Initially started off as a hobby, transition into a more social engagement where I used to get friends and we used to play together, and then transition into a creative art that you're seeing on my YouTube channel. And now my daughters have picked up music, both of my daughters, and I think they are looking at my middle daughter and my youngest daughter. They are really looking at music, and I'm really proud that there was an influence there because music is a very very healthy hobby. And I just want to highlight that at the stage of the life I am, I didn't want to just do music for the sake of doing music, because I felt there needs to be purpose. So all of my songs have some kind of purpose behind them. When I launched my first song, Jana, it was more about hope in COVID because it was one of the worst times, and it's like a ballet, it's like a very happy song, um, really giving hope. The second song I had launched was called Ankaha, like unspoken. What means is the people who lost, because many of my friends and family, they lost somebody dear just because they could not say goodbye to them. So that's what the song Unspoken, that, the love unspoken, because you couldn't even meet people. Very painful. And I felt it, Then the cricket song I launched, which became the national anthem for the T20 Pakistan team. That basically was, it was not just about, stars,